hurricane presentation. My name is Bruce Perkins. I'm the Vice President of the Mechanical Amateur Radio Society. Our group is sponsoring this event. I want to thank the town of Oriental, Diane, your account manager, for hosting this gathering. I mean, this is a great place to always have an event. And our presenter is Eric Hayden from the National Weather Service over in Newport. The office is Newport, Morehead City. And if you haven't been to that office, if you're ever over there, I'm sure that Eric would invite you to take a tour. It's really a fabulous facility. It's where all of our information that you see on the news is coming from, which is good, bad, and ugly. So if they say one thing and it doesn't turn out that way, you can talk to Eric. But we have not done this presentation in Oriental for several years. The last one we did was just prior to the pandemic. Now, and hopefully, we will have them every year during the hurricane season, maybe even earlier than July, but it's a scheduling issue. So hopefully, we'll do this again next year. So, Eric, I will turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us, Bruce. Thanks for the introduction. We do have folks that are home watching this, so just give a nice little wave to everybody at home. Mr. Logan's going to turn the camera around, so thank you very much for those that are joining us. One good thing the last 2 years is we've done hurricane forums like this. We're probably going to continue this indefinitely. So if you can't make it, you feel more comfortable doing it at home, that's what those folks are doing. The other nice aspect of that is it's recorded. So if it all goes well, that will be posted on YouTube. So your family or neighbor, friend, somebody said, wow, I wish I really could have attended this. It'll be posted on YouTube. So they'll have that access to the information as well. Just a show of hands, how many have ever seen the National Weather Service presentation from our office down the road in Newport? So good enough. See, it's not that bad. We've got people returning. So like Bruce said, hopefully we'll do this every year. This hurricane preparedness is each and every year. We're going to go over a brief presentation, a lot of stuff to remember. We put what you should really focus on the first slide, focusing it on the impacts for any storm. Water is what is killing people, and do not just focus on the category of the storm. If you remember those three things, that's what we want to get out. We're going to talk about some products that we offer, but I really want this to be a two-way conversation. So if you have any questions, raise your hand. At the end is a community forum. It's not a presentation and then you go home and that's it. It's open discussion, and this is to share with your neighbors at home. We have a lot of new people moving to the area. We have people that have survived storms before and think that, hey, I've already been through Irene and Florence. I had never had water in my house with those two storms, so I'm going to be okay. That's not the case. So two ends of the extreme, experienced folks that have not seen the worst of a storm and folks that have never been through a storm before. We need your help getting out that information, so please help us by sharing this information with family, friends, and also neighbors. Before we get to our local office, there's a lot of good literature up here. The one thing I'm going to point out, especially if you're a household, try to do one per household because we don't have a lot of these. These are from the North Carolina State Emergency Management, a really, really good hurricane guide. If you don't manage to snag one, there are other resources from us at the Weather Service. But this is more North Carolina centric. It is really, really good information. All of this is your hard tax dollars at work. You pay for these brochures, take them home. Hurricane guides, flooding, rip currents, all the things we're going to talk about tonight are in those guides. The other one that we're pretty happy with, if you had asked us a couple weeks ago, we needed some more of these raindrops, but now we've had too much rain. These are raindrop magnets, has all our information on it. Our website, how to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. You just put that on your refrigerator and you'll be good to go with information. As far as the local office goes, for those that have not attended a class, we're down the road or across the river from you in Newport, North Carolina, so we're marked with that red dot on the map. But we cover roughly the eastern quarter of North Carolina, so inland places like Greenville and Kinston, but also here in Oriental, you're kind of in the middle part of area. You'll notice we do go out into the ocean, so the near valley sounds and rivers, so places like the Neuse River, Pamlico Sound, and that's 20 nautical miles. So if you've been on a boat, you've been to the beach, here on land, we do a forecast for your area. And we do a lot of specialized forecasts behind the scenes, aviation, fire weather for controlled burns. We're open 24/7, and we are your local office. The best way to get information from us is weather.gov. The catchy phrase with that, and this is the new one, Bruce, we always try new things. If it's the weather you love, it's weather.gov. So really easy to remember. Now, there's a lot of information out there. You have paid for this information. There's no ads. It will take some digging and zooming in on the map and entering your zip code. It's kind of information overload sometimes. But this is your information, your tax money at work, local forecasts, radar, and satellite. It's all on that website. The reason why I mentioned weather.gov is you go on vacation other places, you have family from other parts of the country. You just go to weather.gov, you click on wherever you want in the country, and you get the local office. So if you're up in Raleigh or Wilmington or Spokane, Washington, you'll get the local forecast for that area. Yes.
We always encourage our folks to use National Weather Service and NOAA services, a trusted source,
Yes.
especially when we have emergency situations, because remember, everybody else is trying to keep your attention. They're trying to keep their ratings. There's a reason they're trying to keep you there. You're going to get the unbiased information out of these trusted sources.
We really appreciate that. I get paid the same whether it's sunny or Hurricane Florence. So we try to get it right. We try to give you the best information we can, and it's all there at your fingertips. So really appreciate that. And we'll talk about that in the social media section. That's how you can help us as well. So weather.gov, if you put /Morehead City or just click the QR code, you'll be able to find our local information. On that page, the town has access to some of this information, and you do as well. These are called weather briefings. This is what the town is briefed on. These PDF briefings are on the bottom of our page. If you go today, when we don't expect a hurricane or widespread severe weather event, nothing's going on. But if you scroll to the bottom of the page under weather hazard briefing, there will be a PDF document during big weather, winter storm, severe weather, hurricane. It might take a couple minutes to read. It's not a 30-second news headline. A lot of information is on that briefing, and those are accessible to the public. So again, weather.gov/Morehead City, scroll to the bottom of the page, and weather hazard briefings can be found there. Eric, that website is too cluttered. You said go down here, click there. I just don't have time. I've got kids, grandkids. I'm too busy. We're all too busy, right? Social media is where we wave our hands and say, this is what you should be paying attention to. I know there could be a lot of wrongs in terms of spreading information on social media, but it can also be used to spread good information. And this is where you can help us. Share our official sources of information. It doesn't mean we always get it right. I know you think we do get it right most of the time. It means this is the most accurate and official source that everybody's looking at for this information. If you're all sharing the same thing, then people don't have to question, well, this person's saying this person's saying that. It doesn't do us any good if you share something 15 days out about the hurricane that's never going to get here. Stick to the trusted sources. Social media, we love for that. We're all over the place on social media. This is a tweet I did the morning of Florence. And read that. Do not let your guard down. Our impacts have not changed. Catastrophic flooding. Again, we get paid the same no matter what happens. So when we use very severe language, we mean business. And getting calls the morning and the day leading up to Florence, hey, it's a 4, and now it's a 3, and now it's down to a 1. Should I come back home? Should I not pay attention to it? Waving our hands, saying, nothing has changed with regards to flooding. Don't let your guard down. So that's an example of how we use social media. On the right, YouTube, we don't do daily videos, but those briefings we give to local officials, we usually do a webinar, 5, 10, 15 minutes. Again, it's not a 30-second soundbite. It's going to take you a while to listen. We go over everything on those webinars. That's posted online. So lots of good information there. This is what we want you to pass on. New neighbor, hey, did you know the Weather Service is right down the road from us, weather.gov. They put out briefings. They do a lot of information. it's a good resource. You should pay attention. All right, so the big thing out of that is weather.gov, hurricane talk. Anytime we give one, if I give this in April or July or October, I would say the time to prepare is now. We started doing these forums about 4 years ago, and the idea was to spread out this information throughout hurricane season. It doesn't do us any good to talk about it in May, because are we really going to go out there and get our 3 to 7 days worth of stuff? Most of us not. So we're trying to spread the message out throughout the year, because we're a long season in terms of hurricanes here in Eastern North Carolina. This is what I mean. This graphic shows the frequency of hurricanes and tropical storms, which is red, and hurricanes, which is yellow. So pretty low, May, June, July, not much going on average. So please remember that. I will never, ever, ever forget this. It's coming up on 5 years I've been here in Eastern North Carolina. Late August, did a talk like this, 2018, and somebody said, wow, looks like we made it through hurricane season. We don't have to worry about anything. Whoa. And of course, that was a year, a couple weeks later, we had Florence. So big piece of information. It's really quiet now. And I've already read the headlines. Hurricane season's really gonna, predicted to ramp up. Well, it does every year. It's what happens. August and September, the water continues to warm. Hurricanes get their energy from the water, and that's why it peaks about September 10th. But we can get storms as early as May. 2 years ago, we had Tropical Storm Arthur. Usually not as impactful because the water's not super warm, but really anytime after May 1st, you should be thinking about hurricanes. A lot of our biggies have been around that late August, mid-September timeframe, but we've also had storms well into the month of October with Sandy. So please keep that in mind. It's never too late, but really we're getting to that point now that things are going to really start ramping up overall. Each hurricane season it happens. So think about completing your kit. Think about going over your plan now, not waiting until the peak of the season itself. If you need more convincing, just a show of hands, how many of you have lived here less than 5 years? Wow, so similar to me. So that's a good audience. So show of hands, and then twirl it around. So we're gonna do this again. Show of hands, how many have lived here less than 5 years? So a lot of folks. Keep them up if you've been here less than 2 years. There's still some folks that didn't go through forums. Very, very good. We are the most, this is the list that you don't want to be at the top of. We are the most impacted stretch of coastline for tropical systems in the whole United States. Obviously, recently it's been New Orleans and the Gulf Coast. When you're talking last couple of years, but over a longer period. On average, every 5 to 7 years, we see a hurricane pass, within 50 miles of our coastline. So we get hit a lot, we stick out, and we're also going to talk about how you don't have to have a direct hit to have impacts in our area. So what can you do? It sounds daunting. Eric said it's May to October. I just moved to this great place, and now he's saying we're one of the most prone locations. What can you do about it? There's a lot of things that you have control over. We have zero control over how many storms we get, how bad it is, but you do have control over making yourself more resilient. And one place is to determine what is your risk where you live. So on our website, weather.gov/Morehead City, really proud of this website, Hurricane Prep. A lot of information on there, evacuation routes, planning, but we're going to break it into 3 parts. The first part is determining your risk. What your risk level is going to determine a lot. How much of a kit you need, whether you need to leave or not. And the risk is not just all weather related. If you live along the harbor or along the Neuse River and you're 3 feet above the level of the river, sea level, you're very vulnerable to water and storm surge. You know that. But maybe you have someone in your home that has medical challenges, is on oxygen, and would be severely impacted if you lost power. Maybe you're like me and you've got 3 younger kids and a wife, 14, 11, and 8, and an old cat. Good old Rocky's 18 and a half. So he's part of the hurricane plan too. That's another thing. I'm staying. I don't leave. My work, we stay at work. It's a fortified building and we stay. But my plan includes sending the wife and kids and cat. You're talking hotels, which ones take pets, things of that. So determining your risk is not just weather, it's what is your household vulnerability. And again, that's not something to scare you, it's just something to think about. When you want to think about this today. Oriental, mid-July, there's no storms on the horizon. So that when the storm comes, you know, okay, this is what we're going to do. So determining your risk is the first step. I have down here NC flood maps. That's a good resource to do to determine, you might, if you Google NC flood maps, or if you go to flood.nc.gov, and again, this is where we can have the conversation afterwards. With the help of Logan, I zoomed into Oriental. It's really hard to see here, but this is Oriental. The town label is up there. We're roughly about here, and then down toward the harbor is what usually gets flooded. We saw that with Irene. We saw that with Florence. The blue area is the 100-year floodplain, and the yellow area is the 500-year floodplain. What that means is, in the blue area, it's a 1 in 100 chance any year you could have a flood. It's a probability. It doesn't mean I have the flood this year. I don't have to worry about it for 100 more years. That's why you can have back-to-back 500-year floods, back-to-back 100-year floods. It just means you're pretty vulnerable to flooding if you're in that blue area. If you're in the yellow area, it's a 1 in 500 chance any year, a little less vulnerable. If you're outside of those areas, you're the least vulnerable. The farther away you are from it, less vulnerability. The higher up you are, less vulnerability. And it's not an exact science, it's a lot based on elevation, but if you compare that map to what we saw with Irene and Florence, pretty close. There's other variables like wave action and what way the wind was blowing and things like that. That's a good first step. So homework today is, hey, let me look at the elevation of my house. You can see that in Google Earth. Let me look at these flood maps. How close am I? You've already bought the house, you're not going to move, but perhaps you need to do some things in your yard to prepare yourself for that. Or perhaps you need to think, hey, I need to get out of here because I'm in an area that floods. Or perhaps I need to raise stuff up. Yes.
Just this roof.
Yes.
In Irene, the old town hall was here, and it was flooded.
Yes.
This building, the old building was flooded.
Same location,
Same building.
same building.
This building was at grade.
Okay.
It was an old fire station, so we had extra height. So 3.5 feet got filled in, new slab poured into the existing structure.
How
high are you?
I don't
We're
know.
4 feet,
Yeah.
4 feet, but
we're 4 feet above grade.
right.
And we're about 7 feet above sea level here. A guy checked out on Google Earth.
So Florence came to our top step.
So perspective, again, if you didn't hear her, 2011, Irene and Florence were very similar. I mean, some places had it a little worse, some places not as bad, but those are the two benchmarks. And where we are is where water got to in 2011 and close in Florence. Where we are right today. Yes.
Why wouldn't the coast put on stilts then if they knew it was?
I'm not sure. I mean, a lot of things have changed through the years,
I
and
heard that the government paid people to put their homes on stilts once, I guess years ago, so it wouldn't be.
and sea level rising, and we've had some changes too. So, yeah.
So the new flood maps, the flood map that you're looking at, is the first set of flood maps that was taking off of computerized data. The previous set of flood maps was off of anecdotal data, marks that people had put on buildings and such. So the new flood maps, unfortunately for us, all the data is from 2010 and prior. So neither Irene nor Florence data are in this. 330 structures came out of the floodplain in these maps. The county did pass a flood damage prevention ordinance, which we are signed on to, and all of the municipalities surrounding are signed on to, which did raise that floorboard number to get us up a little higher. Right, so anything that's built new is built to a new standard.
Very good. And this is exactly what we want out of a community forum. I'm a meteorologist, an expert in this, and then we really appreciate the town being here and hosting us and answering those questions. Because it's about education. We saw how many folks raised hands, and Florence and Irene, I wasn't here, but Florence, I'm in Newport, focused on what's happening with the weather. But so we really appreciate that. That's very, very good. So we talked about, what is your vulnerability? That's something to think about. How can you look at it? The next thing, in a three-part thing to focus on is hurricane kit. That's probably the most frequently talked about thing. So you're in a floodplain, you can't move your house, you gotta have a kit. If you're gonna stay or go, whatever you decide, you gotta be prepared to be on your own for a while if we get a bad storm. The old adage was at least 3 days, just bare minimum. Gotta be on your own for 3 days. Really pushing more people toward a week to not expect help, to be able to be on your own for 7 days. What would you need to survive without electricity? Could you survive without electricity? Do you have something on oxygen, or do you have health issues that it just doesn't make sense? You might need to leave, not because your house is going to blow away or you're in a vulnerable flood area, but your house is just not ready to sustain somebody through not being without power for a week. On this website, Hurricane Prep, the basics: food and water, keeping your gas tanks full, cash on hand, medicine, don't forget your pets. There's a whole list of things that you can think of on that. And again, this is where you need to adjust your kit. Our kit's, 5 days to 7, roughly, for our family. Because our plan pretty much is if it gets any semblance of bad, they're out of here. I don't want to have to worry. I want to repair the house. I don't want to worry about the kids and the wife and good old Rocky. You just send them away. Don't worry about it. But if you're like, I'm on a high point, I've got a generator, I never left in Irene or Florence, all right. Well, be prepared for at least a week's worth of, supplies that you can do it on your own. That's an example where you might want to go along with your hurricane kit. And then the last step is, okay, I've determined what my vulnerabilities are. Again, not just weather, medical as well. I've got my kit, I'm ready to go. Last step is, if I have to leave, where would I go? Where would I go if I have pets or if I need assistance? Where are shelters, if not in the county, outside the county? What are the resources I would tap into? And then so for me, my parents are moving down from Maryland. I grew up south of Baltimore in Columbia, if anybody knows where that is. Yes. So 37 years they've been up there, they're moving down to our area. So there goes Plan A. Plan A was, Dorian and Florence, Rocky and Becky and the kids went up to Maryland. Plan B was South Carolina, so we got a lot of family there as well. So now my Plan A is probably just the mountains and just rent a place. Just get on out, and then so that's probably going to be Plan A. I forgot to mention this step. On your kit, another reason we do these forms is I don't think of these information. I hear from you, I hear from people that have a way more experience than I do. Fire chief down in Beaufort, we did a talk a year or two ago. He had this good analogy. With our economic times, some people might not be able to get their kit. They can't go out this week and get a couple $100 worth of food and water now, right? So you get a little bit each week. So when a family says, I just don't have the money for it now, it's all right. Just like with anything, when you're weeding in the garden like me, or you have a task you just don't want to do, you break it into small parts. You get some canned goods this week, next week you get some water, the next week you get more canned goods, a little bit at a time. That'll spread out the economic burden and then allow you to be prepared. So keep that in mind. If you can't get everything at once, it's all right. Spread it out. You've got time. Think about that with your kid.
Can you
Yes,
tell us when you make that decision to evacuate?
So that is your decision. So,
But when do you make your decision?
oh, when I make my, I have the special plan. And so when do I make my decision? Many days in advance, because I don't want them stuck on the road,
Right.
So with Florence, it was like 4 days ahead of time. I think it was Monday, and it got here Thursday. Just, this looks really bad. Just get out of here. So that's my threshold. So for you, you have to factor all that in. That, hey, how long is it going to take me to get out of here? Do I have the finances to stay at a hotel? Do I have a hotels that can take pets? Do I have family outside the area? These are things you think of today, so that when it happens, you can just make your plan and go. The counties, there is a campaign called Know Your Zone, evacuation zones in the counties. That's on our website as well. And that's based on vulnerability, especially to water. So there's certain zones that you will be told to evacuate sooner, and that's your vulnerability, which is pretty much based on the storm surge map. Yes.
Can you stay longer if you have a generator? Like, does that increase your chances of being able to stay in your?
It does, especially if you're not vulnerable to water, so being able to stay on your own, having food and water, having a way to generate power can increase your longevity. You gotta think about gas, like if it's not propane or something like, if it's just regular gasoline, you gotta have a lot of tanks because a lot of those places are run out prior to the storm or potentially would be without power and wouldn't be able to pump it. So it can, but you just have to think about your vulnerability. So you can have all the power in the world, but if you're 3 feet above sea level and you're surrounded by water or your water in your home, you don't want to stay. So as long as your vulnerability is not there, it's something to think of. And again, we'll provide weather, but we never say like you should do this or should do that. Just follow the local officials. They're the experts. We provide them with the weather, and then they tell you, based on where you are. If you're the biggest advice too on that is if you are in an evacuation zone, listen to what they say.
Should you turn off your electrical appliances when you evacuate?
Yeah. Usually that's a good and gas.
And
Yeah.
gas, okay.
They also recommend turn off the-
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I do remember doing that for Florence.
What if you lived on a creek, if your residents, we're new to this area.
Sure.
Both of us are. If you lived on a creek and your house is facing a creek, our house particularly is not, I don't know how it is, but our house is not very hurricane, I would say, and you can quote me if I'm wrong, our house is not hurricane proof. And if you lived on a creek, and I'm not saying News River, but if you lived on a creek, what are the chances?
That's a great question. So, and you bring up a good point because we mentioned the Neuse River, but what flows off or comes into the Neuse River, a lot of smaller creeks and streams, and they back up as well. So you're vulnerable to surge and flooding up creeks as well. Yeah. So a lot of it's elevation based, like, okay, you're along the creek, but you're up at 10 feet, then maybe not as much. But if you're,
We actually live on Pearson's Creek.
Okay.
Here in Oriental.
Yep. And that's determining your risk. You could talk to neighbors. No two storms are alike though, just because you didn't get water with Irene or Florence. So we do the best we can. We talk to neighbors. We see how bad it's been in the past. Oh, okay, I haven't had water, but it got up. You kind of gauge that, your elevation, vulnerability of the house, and kind of put it all together, and you make the best decision you can. Yep. Yes, ma'am. You're welcome.
Just a quick question. Do you know anything about solar generators? Are they worth buying? I'm not a third floor.
Yeah.
I can't imagine I'm allowed to have that.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the solar generator, so I'm not, sorry. Yes.
You mentioned that you will put out the information and say all this sort of thing, but we should listen to our local officials.
Yes.
And I do not think that Diana Trump are going to show up on my front door telling me what to do. Please surprise. I'm just wondering, what source do you all use to put out the information to the town?
We recommend, highly recommend that you sign up for Pamlico County's Code Red system. If you go to the county website, at the very bottom, scroll all the way to the bottom, they have a Code Red, it's a little block. You click on it, you put in your phone number, cell phone numbers, however you want to be notified, email. And whenever they put out something related to usually the self-briefing, after they do the self-briefing, we get a briefing from the state, we, the town and the county, we all meet together up in the county, and the state FEMA goes through what we're expecting, what kind of resources are coming at us. But that honestly covers the entire county, and anything that you need to hear, like if Mr. Buck, the county manager, declares a mandatory evacuation, that will be pushed out, and it'll, doesn't matter if you have your phone on silent, doesn't matter. beep, 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 and it'll get your attention. Where if there's something, this road has been washed out, or something like that.
That's great, a great question. And I just can't thank you enough for providing that feedback. And for those watching at home too, for Pamlico County, it's code red. In most counties it is, but it could be something called hyper reach, or it could be different programs. Get with your local county. If you just Google your county and information, it's always on their website. And just like she mentioned, it's a lot of weather alerts. It could be tornado, it could be flood. I still remember coming home in Florence, working long days and then prepping my house for different things and hearing the on my phone and from the code red for Carteret County. So that's great information. Yes.
I just want to ask everyone here, does anybody in this room now live over around Minnesota Beach? Okay, the reason I ask is because the same thing that Kathy Diane brought up, but we are trapped. For the flooded areas trying to get out, we have very limited access out. So it's extremely important to listen to what Ken's telling us and what Diane's telling us, to react in advance if you need to get out.
Yeah, if you need to get out, we're gonna tell you as early as we can, because, once those pathways, especially if you're going out 55, where all the little bridges are, goes down, and those go under. Once those go under, we're stuck.
Do you call for evacuations based on when?
Right. So you don't call.
The question was, do we call for evacuations based on wind?
Usually water dependent. Florence was the first time it was wind because there was a category 4 storm coming in. So there are whole county evacuations. It's something we've never had before. It's usually water based. Like the know your zone, like if you look at the counties and they have it broken down into like A, B, or C, like most vulnerable to lesser vulnerability, it's usually water dependent. And I'll show you why. Wind is to be respected, but water is the big deal.
Our whole county's in zone A.
You're highly vulnerable. You can see on the Google Earth map, like 306 east of there, how much elevation drops, and then south and east from here of Highway 55. All right, who had a good gym? Oh, yes, ma'am.
I just want to say, because we know that we're vulnerable, I grew up, I've spent 35 years at least on either the North Carolina coast or the southeastern Virginia coast. So hurricanes are what they are. Very familiar, sadly. It's really important to make sure that you're paying attention to the right sources and to actively pay attention to them when the weather's getting bad. So if you're on Facebook, make sure you're following the town of Oriental, because they're good about pumping out information. Make sure that if you're in the town, make sure that you're getting your email. They push out emails from time to time. Make sure that you get those. And if you're not getting those, make sure that you know how to make sure that you get those, because they've got really valuable information. If you're a Twitter person, make sure that you're following the right places on Twitter. Make sure you're doing that now. And don't wait, because the town does a great job. I grew up in Virginia Beach, Virginia, where y'all could have done a better job of pushing out information as vulnerable as they are. And then, of course, that was a long time ago and things were more limited, but this town does a fantastic job. Doug, would you talk about the parking on high ground in places like our parking lot?
Yes, ma'am. Pastor Ann is pastor of a church down the street, and her parking lot is high ground. And the parking lot at the church off of Reagan,
That's the Free Will Baptist Church.
also is high ground. And then there's always the bridge. And so folks who know that they are on low ground move their vehicles, and that's part of that document that we were talking about that's in our town package, is a piece of paper that says, put this in your windshield if you're leaving your vehicle on high ground, so that if there's a problem, we can find it. So, and the report too, we have several places in town where you can leave a vehicle if your house is more vulnerable than those places. So, encourage you to, and we push, Pastor Graham will tell you, our emergency management team, like we use you as the trusted source, we use the churches. So one person from each church in town is on our emergency management team. We give the information to them. We ask them to be the trusted source and disseminate those things to their parishioners so that, everybody's not waiting till the last minute. It doesn't.
And I think you'll see in your packet, maybe, there's an information form for when you leave your car to leave on the dash, so that should something happen, should you go to stay with your granddaughter who delivers 3 weeks early and you extend your stay by a couple of extra weeks and you don't get back to move your car and it has to be moved for you, we know where to get you to let you know where we move your car to, There are all kinds of really wonderful reasons why we might have to do that. We might also have to call to tell you that there's a tree down there, but hopefully it's something fun instead. But it's really important that you, when there's something like that that we can do for you, give you a safe space to leave your car, that we have a way to contact you and let you know.
So we keep talking about, you want to talk about this a little bit, or?
It's our hurricane package, and it has a specific, it has the form that we were just talking about. It also has a form that we ask you to stick, if you evacuate, to stick on the back of your front door for several reasons. It tells me that you've left. If your structure is compromised and emergency management gets to your house, to a compromised structure, the furthest they have to go is your front door. And then on the back of that front door, it says that we are not here, so they are not going into a compromised structure to look for people who aren't there. It also allows us to contact you and say, hey, if there's a tree across the house, we're doing what we can to secure it, but just making you aware of what's going on. And then specialty list. We're an older community, so it's the checklist kit for seniors. And it's, extra things like remember to get your medication, get an extra pair of glasses, make sure you do all those things that, and then there, because there's not a lot of babies here. It's not like we have to get extra diapers, we have to get extra glasses, And it tells you who to contact, there's a contact sheet in there that has all the hour numbers, local, electric, cable, all those folks. And the most important piece of information in that kit is that the 472 is on you.
Yes.
I'm trying to keep the water pumping, I'm trying to make sure that the streets are clear, there's no trees across the roads, emergency vehicles have access, and we're doing damage assessment to see how many structures have issues. So the first 72 hours, I really can't help an individual resident. We will do everything we can ahead of time to help you get ready. I understand that some folks have, heavy lawn furniture that they need help moving. And we do the best we can to help you when we can, which is another reason why we work with the churches. But as soon as that wind goes down under 55 miles an hour, we have a checklist and we have to go through all of those things.
So thank you so much. And if you need one of those packets of information, it's up on the table. For those that are attending virtually, you can contact the town. They'll definitely put you in touch with
It's all
them.
online also.
It's online. Okay.
You mentioned turning off the gas. Our propane tanks float if you've got a freestanding one. So turn it off because if it kinks the line, it'll break and you'll lose all your propane. Also, the propane company will, at your request, attach it to your building so it won't take off somewhere. So that's a key issue you need to look out for.
We have the right several.
All right. Did everybody have a real good dinner before they came here? Logan and I went over to Brinkley's, had a good dinner, so we're good to go. Raise your hand. You can show this, Logan. How many have heard about the spaghetti models? These spaghetti models. I'm not talking about spaghetti like Italian meal, but heard about spaghetti models. Okay. So if you haven't, what we're talking about is this, and I'm sure you've seen it either on social media or sometimes on TV, all these lines about what could happen. What we want you to focus on is not that, but focus on the National Hurricane Center, trusted sources of information. Almost 200 years of experience at the Hurricane Center. We're looking at all that. What the spaghetti models are possible outcomes. But what do you look at? The one that hits your area, even though everything else is going out to sea. We look at all of that. We look at trends. We look at the European model, the American model. A lot of people are into the weather. We look at everything. And we make small adjustments and trends so we don't have the windshield wiper effect, so that we don't say it's going to hit here, then here, then here, and it kind of moves all over the place. So please trust the official sources. I've got to say that though, right? 'Cause I work for the Weather Service. I can't say, hey, pay attention to some online meteorologist on social media. I'll show you facts, how far we've come. This is 1999 Floyd. That was kind of our benchmark before Matthew, Irene, the storms the last 10 or 15 years. But in 1999, this is showing the difference in 3 days track forecast. And in 1999, our average error was hundreds and hundreds of miles. So 3 days out, Hurricane Floyd is coming. I would say the center of the storm could hit somewhere from southeast Virginia down to eastern Georgia. Wide area. That's just based on our statistical error. We didn't have supercomputers that weren't as good as they are now. We're making huge improvements. Fast forward to 2019 with Dorian, I could say the landfall, just the center of the storm, would be somewhere over southeast North Carolina by Wilmington. So we've improved a lot with the track forecasting, a tremendous amount. So please pay attention to official sources. You don't need, I mean, it's already happened this year. I remember like a month and a half ago, people were talking about big hurricanes coming up the coast, and you don't need to look at one model or any of this. Just pay attention to official sources. You don't need to get worked up about stuff that you don't need to get worked up on. So I keep saying official sources. Well, what do you mean? If it's hurricanes you love, it's hurricanes.gov. So that's that one. This is a National Hurricane Center site. It's part of the Weather Service. We're all together. They're the experts in Miami. They work with us to issue hurricane watches and warnings, tropical storm watches and warnings. They're the ones that send the hurricane hunters in to the storms. They're the ones that track, predict it, experts. So hurricanes.gov. One of the ladies had mentioned, hey, now start to pay attention, town of Oriental, local sources. Now's the time to be familiar with this website. The first thing they'll do 4 times a day is issue a tropical weather outlook. We've already had some of these that showed potential development off our coast, like we had, I guess around 4th of July weekend. This is the good heads up, 30-second, hey, do I have to worry about anything over the next 5 days? And it'll highlight low, medium, or high potential storm activity over the next 5 days. The one that you're probably more familiar with is the forecast cone. This shows the most probable path for the center of the storm. Couple things to get out of that. Notice the cone is really, really narrow. A couple days out, and it gets larger, farther in time, because statistically our error is worse day 4 and 5 than day 1 and 2. You will notice through the years the cone has gotten very, very narrow because it's based on our error. It's not based on the current storm. We're getting really, really good, very, very narrow. It only shows where the center is expected to go. It could deviate out of that path, number one, but even if it goes in that path, impacts occur well away from the center. A hurricane is not a dot on the map. Florence hit down by Wilmington, and we had impacts, right? Hundreds of miles away, impacts can be felt. So just know that if you're anywhere in the general vicinity of this, you should be paying attention. It's not a, I'm in the path, I should be worried. I'm out of the path, I don't have to worry about it. Does that part make sense? It's just the center. It doesn't show how much rain we're going to have. It doesn't show, it's just where we think the center of the storm is going to go. Very useful for that, but sometimes people think they're either in or out of it based on the cone. Again, on the Hurricane Center website, on our website, in our briefings, a couple more graphics. Lady in the front asked about when should we leave, or or how do we, like, when do you know when to go? This graphic here. This is called the earliest time of arrival. This is our reasonable worst case scenario when tropical storm force winds are expected, 39-mile-per-hour winds. This is what officials use to plan evacuations. When do we need to get people out of here so they're not on the road when it's bearing down on us? So the reasonable worst case scenario, if you have your plans complete by this time, you're good to go. So this is Florence. I would say, hey, if you're set by Wednesday evening, early Thursday morning, you're good to go. That's when you finish your preps in your yard, you've made your decision to leave, you've done whatever you're going to do. That's what that graphic is. And then the sister graphic to that is, well, when do we actually expect it to get here? The most likely time of arrival. It's in our briefing. It's on the Hurricane Center site. The town will share it. It's out there. So that's what those graphics are. All right. How many, and definitely get this one loaded, how many have heard somebody say You have said it yourself. I'm not gonna leave unless it's a 3. Or I'm not gonna leave unless it's a 2. Or I'm not gonna leave unless it's a 4. Have you, and we have a lot of new folks in this area, so for the experienced people, how many times have you heard, I'm not gonna leave, it's just a 2. I'm not gonna leave unless it's a 3, right? So what they're talking about, and this is, pay attention to water and do not pay attention to just category. The category of the storm is only related to wind. This is the Saffir-Simpson scale, rates hurricanes, only based on wind. It doesn't say how much storm surge you're going to have, how many inches of rain you're going to have, how many days it sits over you, what side of the storm you're on. It's fast moving, it's slow moving. It's useful. Was I scared when Florence was a 4? Yes, I live 3 miles from the ocean front. It's to be respected. I didn't say, hey, don't pay attention to the category. Respect it. It is only part of the puzzle. Too many people, the lady up front is going to do a story on this. And I said, what's the one thing I want to get across? Too many people focus on this as the only way to determine if they should leave or not. They don't think about the whole picture, their vulnerability, their risk, what other factors are going to occur in the storm. Don't just pay attention to the category. More statistics. We've had a lot of just ones. Do you guys, you remember Irene, 2011? Does anybody remember Florence? Remember Florence, Matthew? A lot of just ones. Between 2010 and 2019, over $100 billion in damage and just under 200 deaths from a lot of just ones. So again, please do not focus on just the category. Focus on all of the impacts that can occur. And one of those is water. From 63 to 2012, about 90% of our deaths were water related. A lot of storm surge, about a third were rainfall. So water was killing people. Well, last time I checked, it's 2022. We have some new statistics. We do through last year, it's still a lot of water. Not as much wind, or not as much storm surge. Freshwater flooding is about 2/3, and it's surface rip current issue up around 0.75%. So wind is traditionally around 8 to 15%. Could a tree fall on your home? Yes. Could you die because of falling trees? Yes. Wind is dangerous, but it's water, whether it's storm surge or flooding, that is killing people. So that's what we wanted to get across, the focus on all of the impacts, not just wind. So as we wrap things up and turn it over to you, we're going to go over the aspects of water first, and we're going to put wind down near the bottom, because again, statistically, water is what is killing folks. So for you that have just moved here in the last 2 years, this is our rainfall map for Florence. Shows a huge disparity. It's hard to read the numbers, but only 2 inches up in the northern Outer Banks, 20 to 30 inches. I live down here. 25 to 30 inches of rain down our way. You were on the edge, about 15 to 18 inches, southern Pamlico County, and you can see it really dropped off to the north. So very slow moving storm, almost 3 feet of water. And again, that doesn't show up on the category scale. Florence sat here forever and produced a tremendous amount of rain. Yes.
I just want to make a point about that because it was up the river, up the Neuse River, where the impact was way greater.
Yes.
And that's, that's sort of an important part of that whole water thing.
It is, especially the surge related. We'll talk about
Yeah.
that.
Wow,
Yeah.
surge related, and then the
Yeah.
second round of flooding,
Yes.
because the news flooded twice
Yes.
with Florence.
Yes. Yeah, it was a double whammy with the flooding, and then different parts, like you said, saw it at different times. Farther inland, places like Kinston will take a while to flood, but then you can't get back because it crosses Highway 70. Yes,
Is
ma'am.
there something here to ask people to run through this right now? Like you would a fire drill, what you do with a fire drill. I had friends almost die in Sandy on Bartley Bay. They're trapped in the attic and they're self dead and stuff. They're still in Florida. Notified the first aid squad, couldn't get a hold of them. That's how they lived.
Yeah. Yes, you talk to people that have,
They get through it, they lived there for 40 years.
they've lived there and it hadn't happened before, and I literally remember my pastor priest asking me to speak before Florence Sunday, and it's, wow, it's still 5 days out, it's hard to, at that point it was a 4. A lot of people that stayed said they would never do it again. So until you've been through it, it's just, and again, no 2 storms are alike, maybe you got through it and you're fine. But
Relax if you go in the attic.
Yes, water, water, water. So on the one end, it's flash flooding or river flooding. Like Ms. Ann was saying, we can also have flooding along the river, and this can be, your smaller creeks and streams can be rapid rises, and then your larger rivers can take days or weeks to flood. So it's not a, hey, the storm's over with, it's sunny out, I'm good to go. It can, increase difficulties getting back or increase difficulties leaving. So, hey, the storm's really bad. I don't want to stay here anymore. The power's out and I want to go somewhere else. It's too late because you're here. You'll be cut off because of the rivers and creeks. This is an example of an inland area, but just to show you, you say, well, a lot of people are dying in water. More than half are in vehicles. So again, more than half are the deaths are in vehicles. It's not water coming up and they're in the attic. That can certainly happen, but it's more crossing areas that are vulnerable. So you see this water, very, very powerful. It doesn't take a lot to sweep your car off the road. That's assuming the road's even there. So a lot of, the person, we mentioned the small water crossings we have and bridges, the culverts that can get washed out. Water is very, very powerful, and you don't know how deep it is. So again, it's a preventable death, not crossing flooded roads. Our big campaign with that is turn around, don't drown. This is 2021 last year statistics. We're still losing 2/3 people freshwater flooding, and most of those are in vehicles. So it's just like having a smoke detector in your house. These are preventable deaths. We can't stop the rain, can't make the storms go away, but we can prevent those deaths by not crossing the flooded roads. So heavy rain, flash flooding, and river flooding. The way we're situated in Oriental, facing the Neuse River, we have this large body of water to our east called the Pamlico Sound, very, very shallow. So whenever the wind blows from the northeast, the east, or the southeast, it blows up the river or back toward us, and it can pile the water up on our end of the sound. And then when it sloshes back the other way, Hatteras Island and Overcoat flood. It's the way it always happens. Not just storm related with regards to hurricanes. Since I have a captive audience, this is any time the wind blows and any duration of wind. It doesn't have to have a name, and it doesn't have to be in August for this to happen. So anytime we have windstorms, we can have these issues. Some of our worst flooding can be during the wintertime from nor'easters. So the Neuse River especially, it can get funneled up very wide where we are, but especially with regards to how much more narrow it is toward New Bern. So like an arrowhead, like if you constrict a hose, like a garden hose, flows faster and rises. The same thing with the water up the river. They have 8 to 11 feet of storm surge in New Bern. Again, 8 to 11 feet at a low-lying area, normally dry. You're talking basketball hoop size heights in terms of water, a lot. And again, with the surge here, up to about where we are for Irene and close in Florence. So very, very, we're vulnerable with our location, not just in the river, but the way the water is pushed back toward our coast. So surge, flooding, river flooding, water, water, water. Yes, ma'am.
Eric, I'm the mayor of Oriental, and I have lived here 64 years, and now y'all know how old I am. But anyway, I've seen a lot of hurricanes, and you really should evacuate. When the local people tell you to evacuate, you need to go, because you are stuck here. You cannot get out. Our roads cover up like that, and you cannot leave Oriental. And the worst thing is, our emergency people can't come help us. So if you're gonna have a heart attack or stroke, you're gonna die right there in your house if you have not evacuated. So I'm just telling you, you listen to your local people and to this forecast. And thank you, Eric, for coming. I got another meeting, but y'all, I know. You just asked me, because I've been here 64 years. So when they say go, you go, but pray before you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a great point. You don't think of, it's not just the weather. Well, I'm going to be okay. The water's not to get to me. You don't know. You might have to be in the attic. But if you just have a regular medical emergency, but something that they can respond to quickly, right? It's not regular when they can't get you. So that point really, I think when people decide whether to stay or not, they think, hey, you know, I'm out of harm's way, but if something happens, they can't respond and help you. So that's a very, very good point.
I was asked that question today. What is the point where they stop responding? And so technically, officially, when the winds get over 55 miles an hour, technically, officially, EMS stops responding, and they will not respond again until the wind comes under 55. In Florence, we had exceptional resources. We had NYPD and FDNY, Swiftwater Rescue, a lot of things. So they were out in the height of the storm, and several folks needed that kind of assistance. But generally, once the winds go over 55, they are not coming out. Part of it is the water comes up, they can't get through it, we don't have all that high water response.
And communication drops, because the cell towers go out, phones are out.
So if the evacuation comes at 55 miles an hour,
Oh, no, evacuation is days ahead.
okay, but if you see that it's reaching 55 miles, it looks like the whole town should leave.
Well, it's just, you can't get emergency help.
Right.
That's a,
And even if it's mandatory, I cannot make you leave your home,
Correct.
but I will not be able to help you.
Yes.
Diane, how long was it, looking at Florence maybe as an example, before there was access to the town? From the outside, well, from the outside, 55, whether it's truck, fuel truck, you know, people that have evacuated.
We were down a good 16, 18 hours. that we were isolated. Right.
Okay, but
The highway.
the highway. Yeah.
Very good. All right. One of the last aspects of water we're going to cover is rip currents. The lady up front was interviewing me on the ferry ride over and said, rip currents. Who is out there swimming during hurricanes? My thoughts exactly. But it's well before the storm, well after the storm, or well away from. So picture you're from Ohio, you just booked a whole week down here for vacation, and the storm's not going to get here until Friday, right? You're going to that beach as long as you can until you have to get out of here. Well ahead of the storm, you have powerful swell, and we have dangerous rip currents. As the storm leaves, the water doesn't just instantly calm down. It's very, very rough, rip currents. Or in 2019, we lost more people in our state because of, along our coast, because of Lorenzo. Does anybody remember Lorenzo? Then Dorian. Remember Dorian? Lorenzo was 2,000 miles away. We lost, I think it's 8 up and down the East Coast and 4 in North Carolina alone because of rip currents. October weekend, it's nice out, it's not ominous skies, but very powerful swell. So rip currents, messaging with that, it will be included in our briefings. Again, we're not talking people swimming during the storm. We're talking well before, well after, or well away from. This is where you can help us. It's a July weekend, it's gorgeous out. People are flocking to the beach, and there's a high risk of rip currents. Talk about it. Educate them that it doesn't pull you under, it pulls you out. Very narrow stream of water. If you swim left or right, you can easily come back in once you're out of that power pulling you out. Swim at a lifeguarded beach. Those types of things. That's another preventable death along our shoreline. All right, so we talked about water, flash flooding, river flooding, storm surge, rip currents. Now the wind aspect. Tornadoes can occur with any tropical system. Doesn't have to be a hurricane, could be just a depression or a tropical storm. I'll never, ever, ever forget this. This is after family was leaving, because we were back and forth on Dorian, and tornadoes, and they had just come by the office, and they went up on, I think through New Bern and up through like Washington instead of the Western Way, because we had these outer rain bands 24 hours before the storm even got here. And I looked at the webcam. This is Bo Gillett here. Like Kansas or Oklahoma. We get tornadoes here, especially inland. Snow Hill, Kinston, Elizabeth City, Greenville, kind of the inland from us, usually the bigger ones. But we don't have a million webcams here. And I just could not believe what I was seeing. Already had the warning out, and I just couldn't believe it. cause really bad damage along Emerald Isle. So tornadoes can occur well away before the storm actually gets here. And for that, we just say, hey, if you're hunkering down, just have multiple ways to get warnings. Be prepared to, hey, the storm's not here yet, but we've got a tornado in our way. You get a warning on the phone, interior room, lowest level. It's kind of a slap in the face. You're already ready for the hurricane, already anticipating some damage. It can produce localized damage that can be greater than a hurricane in a lot of locations. We mentioned those first outer rain bands. What about Richmond, Virginia? Florence was down here, Wrightsville Beach. Days later, they had multiple tornadoes in the in the Richmond area. And again, the storm itself is already spinning around, so it's not hard to leap of faith. Things already spinning to spin up tornadoes. Usually brief, but again, they can cause enhanced areas of damage. That's something to consider. All right, the last one we're going to end on is wind. Again, it's to be respected. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
I'm on a third floor. And there's an elevator shaft out front and there's a stairwell. Are either of those, I'm thinking they're not safe.
The stairwell downstairs, the lower level.
And
Yes.
then there's the bridge, but I'm always told not to go on
No.
the bridge.
So stairwell, lower level would be better than being up on the third floor. It'd be best if it was in the center of the building, but I still would advise that over the third floor. And the reason why the bridge is not good, I just remember as a kid, way too young for you, but it's like Andover, Kansas, like early 90s. It was the first video cameras and they talked down under the bridge and woo, it was blowing and they were okay, luckily. But again, under a bridge, the air gets constricted. It goes back to that hose effect. You have water coming out of a garden hose, and if you constrict it, you narrow it, it shoots out faster. So yes, lower level. Yeah. You're welcome. No. This is a forum. You don't want to hear me. I mean, a few of you came back. You've heard me before, but I want to hear from you as we hear from mayor, the town, and the pastor up the street that has been through this and then has helped, cars park for water issues. Like, I don't know all this, so I love hearing from you and getting these questions. We change these classes, forums, based on the community. You're different than we are in Carter County. You have different issues than you do on Overcoat or Hatterside. So we adjust based on you. So who remembers Hurricane Arthur? Not the tropical storm a couple years or 2 years ago. So a handful, right? All right, Category 2 storm. Pretty similar landfall by Cape Lookout, but it was small, fast moving. Most of the issues were from where you are. You did have some pretty good winds, 60, 70 mile per hour wind. Most of the issues were over toward the Outer Banks. But you remember Arthur. You remember. How many of you remember Irene that were here? Are you sure? It's just a 1 though. You remember Irene? So just a 1, no trickery. It also hit near Cape Lookout. Large storm, slow moving. So very strong winds, stronger here than we had with Arthur, but over the whole area, 60, 70 mile per hour winds. 13 inches of rain, I think, is about what we had here in Oriental. So don't just pay attention to the category. Respect it, but it's only part of the puzzle. How much rain are we going to get? What's the storm surge? Rip currents, tornado threat. You don't have to decipher that. You don't need a meteorology degree. That's going to be in the briefings. That's going to be on social media. That's going to be shared out there. This is for a presentation I'm doing tomorrow. I never show this because I don't like to show this. So, all right, I'll say it really quick. We always get asked, can you do a hurricane outlook talk? And I say, well, yes, I can. I will put that outlook slide at the end, and I will talk about it for 30 seconds, and I'll move on because what good does it do? Like, we have an active year this year, so we do, statistically our chances are high, but it takes just one storm. It's not a catchphrase. Last year was super busy. Did we get anything? No. I don't know. Florence year was busy, but I remember it because of Lawrence. So it only takes one storm. But the talk I'm doing tomorrow, they were insistent. They really want to hear the science behind it. It's not that I don't know. I just want you to focus on, don't pay attention to just the category. Water is what kills. The forecast track is just where the center will go. I want you to think of those things. But briefly, since I've got this in here, we have a La Nina year. Off the coast of South America, the water is usually neutral. The warm water gets pushed over toward Australia. But right off the coast of South America, if it's below normal water temperatures, it's a La Nina year. If it's above normal temperatures, sea surface temperatures, it's an El Nino year. It looks like we're still having another La Nina now. It's expected to continue into the fall. That means a lot of factors, less shear to break up the storms, more storms coming off of Africa, very favorable for more hurricanes. Combine that with, you need warm water, and this is an anomaly, so it doesn't show how warm the water is, it shows statistically how far above normal it is. So this is like 1 to 2 degrees Celsius warmer July 18th than we should be. So all the conditions are there. I love cooking and eating, so it's the recipe, the eggs are out there, the oil's out there, the oven's preheating. Not everything's come together, but you don't have to run out to the store to get it. It's in your pantry, everything's there, so it's looking like an active year. The prediction is 2/3 of a chance for above normal, and then we're expecting 6 to 10 hurricanes, 3 to 6 major. Again, I usually don't spend more than 30 seconds on this because I really want you to pay attention to, does not matter what this says. If next year it says it's going to be the least active year on record, I would still want you to prepare the same way. Because if we get that one storm, for some of us will remember 92 with Andrew. That, Miami, South Bay, down there, they remember that. That was one storm in August that changed their lives. So you should prepare each and every year the same, no matter what the outlook says. So what can you do now? Hopefully I haven't scared you about this. You have a lot of control. We can't stop the storms. We can't raise our elevation where we are. What you can do now is share this information with neighbors, work on that hurricane kit, water, gas, things like that. You can't stock up on gas, but water, it's going to be gone once we get closer to an actual storm. So you want to get it now. Assess your risks. Focus on the impacts. Don't make your decisions just based on the category. And then don't forget about after the storm. I don't have a slide on here, but we have lost people through the years because of carbon monoxide poisoning, falling out off of ladders, coming back and they're navigating the country roads to get back here and they decide to cross the flooded road and they get swept away. So don't go through all this planning and hear me talk for an hour plus about all this preparation to lose it at the end. So generators outside, not in your garage, a well-ventilated location, ladder safety. Again, don't lose it at the end when you've done all this preparation. So that is it. The QR code there is pretty nifty. Pretty much all your phones should have this now. If you just take a picture of it, it'll send you to that hurricane prep website. At least the younger interns that are working with us this summer, they had encouraged me to put those all over the place. So somebody's got to use it, and it should send you to, if I did it right, it should send you to that website for hurricane preparedness. So at this point, be happy to take questions. Want it to be a discussion. Thank you for those that joined from home. If you missed any of this or you just want to share it with others, it should have worked. I think everything's working. We'll post it probably by the end of business tomorrow on YouTube and we'll share it with you. As you leave, and I know we've got a question over here, please grab these resources. Don't leave without those hurricane guides and our magnets as well. If you like presentations like this, again, we love being here at the town. We do school visits, church groups, anything weather preparedness related, just send me an email. We could not reach you in the community unless you invite us in. We've got all the information. We just need the venue and your audience. So if you think this would be good for a group that you're, work with, let us know and we will make it happen. So I'll be happy. We'll be here as late as you want with any questions. Yes.